speaker for today is someone we all know very well, a distinguished former president of our club, as well as our resident physician, which is nice to have, just in case. I feel safer just knowing that. And he will be speaking today from the Entertaining Speaker Manual, speech number 4, entitled The Gray Eminence and the Summer of '68. Fred Sadler.
You certainly made it easy for me to use Roborant, because if I'm the resident physician, then I probably am Roborant. The time was 1968. The place, the University Club of Washington, D.C., located about 4 blocks just north of the White House on 16th Street, right next to the former Soviet embassy. Blair, my twin brother, identical twin brother, incredibly handsome, and I belonged to the University Club because we could play squash there. They had squash courts. The old rackets were wood, much like tennis rackets. They've evolved. It's an indoor game. You run around and chase a little ball. We were in that area from the year before, 1967, as commissioned officers in the U.S. Public Health Service. And we joined the Public Health Service to work together, me as a physician, newly minted, he as a lawyer, on problems that intersected the medicine-legal interface. And they were kind enough to take us to the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, at NIH it's called, to work there rather than go to Vietnam or some other more dangerous place. And we were very fortunate when we first arrived there to get to work on what turned out to be a very exciting problem, namely, how do you get from cadavers, from human cadavers, human tissues and organs for transplantation and medical purposes. And over the course of that next year, by the summer of '68, we had worked with a group of lawyers to draft a model law called the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act, because by law, this is an area of state law, and the only way you can have a uniform national system is to take each state and pass a law, based in this case on this model. That particular summer day, I was playing squash, apparently in a match, and Blair was upstairs watching from the gallery, when an older, very distinguished, gray-haired gentleman sidled up to him and asked about the game. And Blair began to tell him, and he quickly saw that that person down there and this person and wanted to know what was going on. We're brothers and twins, and yes, we both play, and what do you guys do? And since he was also a lawyer, he was very interested when Blair said, well, we're working on this model law. In fact, it's just finished this summer. And he was so fascinated that he said, you know, I would like to talk to you some more about this. Would you come to have lunch with me someday? And he said yes, and let me know, as any good twin brother would. About 2 weeks later, we got a phone call at NIH from a lovely lady, his secretary, and picked out a date. And very soon, we were walking up the marble steps, as instructed, to his office in downtown Washington. Escorted inside, greeted and checked on to be sure we were where we should be, and came into a beautiful anteroom, an antechamber with magnificent carvings and great portrait paintings on the walls and velvet and just striking architectural dimensions, with a single table sitting in the middle, a round table with a linen tablecloth, and setting for 3 with great, beautiful china and cut glass. And she came out and said, in just a minute, the Chief Justice will see you now. And within a few seconds, Chief Justice Earl Warren walked in and sat down. Gentlemen, the three of us spent the next 2 hours having lunch together. He was very interested in the Uniform Anatomical Gift Act. And I was very interested in Brown versus Board of Education, which was 1954. And he went into that in great detail about how important it was not only to have that law overturned, which had to do with separate but equal schools, which inherently were unequal, but that there be a 9-0 uniform vote in favor of overturning that rule, which the court achieved. And it was very important, he said, that I, as Chief Justice, write the opinion. Well, as we were about to leave, he said, you know, I've really enjoyed this, gentlemen. Would you like to do this again?
Wow.
And we looked at each other and said, yes, I think so. As we tiptoed down the steps of the Supreme Court building, we couldn't wait to run home and say, Mom, guess what we just did? You won't believe this! A couple of weeks later, we're back, the same scenario, the same place, the same table, fresh food. The same Chief Justice, the same 28-year-old boys, which we were, the same 77-year-old Chief Justice. And I remember that time he talked about the election of 1948, when he was running on the Republican ticket with Thomas Dewey, and they were a shoo-in to win the election. But the shocker was that Harry Truman and Alvin Barkley won the election. It was a bitter defeat for him because he was so successful a politician. He'd never lost anything. He was the only 3-term governor of California, and he was so popular that he ran on the Republican ticket, the Democratic ticket, and the Progressive ticket. You could say he won by a landslide. But he did say that out of this bitter defeat in 1948 came the opportunity in 1953 to be appointed by President Eisenhower Chief Justice of the United States of America. Now you can say a lot of things about him. He was in charge of very important decisions. Gideon versus Wainwright, Loving versus Virginia, Miranda versus Arizona. But no one can argue that he had the greatest impact of any jurist in the 20th century in our country. But what I'll remember the most was he was a very generous, supportive, caring man to, as Chief Justice of the United States, to take an interest in 2 fledgling young men and welcome us into his chambers. For that, I will always be grateful. Madam Judge.